Shabbat Shalom, everyone. If we think about Thanksgiving and research its history, I think we would find that it has largely been misunderstood. We usually paint an idyllic picture of pilgrims inviting Native Americans to festive tables piled high with sumptuous dishes. The sumptuous dishes parts attracts me. In truth, the English settlers observed that first Thanksgiving after a year of pitiless adversity. Most historians, it seems, contend that the first Thanksgiving, the one to which our celebration harkens, was celebrated not in the fall of, but actually on July 30th, 1623, after a long and bitterly cold winter, sickness, attacks by Native Americans, and a spring drought that had decimated almost 250 of the 350 colonists. It occurred precisely one day before a ship arrived from England, bringing much needed supplies and additional colonists. It was on that day, that the day before any help arrived, that the pilgrims observed Thanksgiving. Not in a time of abundance, but in a time of want, a time of need, a time of deep concern. And they did it by word and by deed, inviting the very Native Americans who had assaulted them so recently, as well as by praising God. It was not until about 240 years later that Thanksgiving Day became a national holiday. Did it become so in a time of plenty? No. The beginning of the institutionalization of Thanksgiving, like the original Thanksgiving, came at a time of need, want, and concern. It came, in fact, in the darkest moments of the Civil War. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued a proclamation appointing the last Thursday in November the day of observance. The proclamation, written by Secretary of State William H. Seward, states, "In the midst of a civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, it was only then that Thanksgiving Day became a national holiday, supplanting Evacuation Day, which commemorated the British withdrawal from the United States after the American Revolution." In 1939, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt moved Thanksgiving 1 week earlier to try to raise the spirits of all Americans at a time when we were still in the throes of the Great Depression and at the beginning of a time when the world entered into a world war. And then in 1942, not much longer after our country entered World War II, did an act of Congress move the date of Thanksgiving out of any president's hands and finalizing it as the fourth Thursday in November. Thanksgiving has been something that we sensed we needed and wanted in the midst of trouble, in the midst of difficulties and misfortunes at home and abroad. We do Thanksgiving because sometimes we need to find a reason to be thankful. This spiritual truth was articulated by Rabbi Pinchas in the Midrash. Kol hatfilot latid lavo bitelot. The hodaya eina betela. In a future time to come, a messianic era, if you will, all prayer will be canceled, but Thanksgiving will not be canceled. The desire and deep need to offer Thanksgiving will never cease. So even when things look dark, or perhaps especially because things look dark, we can and should find glimmerings of hope and light. In this time when Israel is at war and the world cannot seem to differentiate between the acts of the terrorists and the need for Israel to dismantle the terrorists, when anti-Semitism continues to rise in the world and now seems a visible stain on even the American landscape, when wages seem not to keep up with inflation and the gap between the haves and the have-nots continues to increase, when we still experience gun violence, which makes many of us worried about safety in public spaces, when incivility and rudeness seem to pervade our culture, when people think it moral to laud crassness and other calls to attack others needlessly and senselessly, when a disdain for truth and honor leave many distraught, and as we have learned over the last number of years, when fires can change lives suddenly, or hurricanes or floods or tornadoes, and undermine our confidence in what we have built and achieved, the need for Thanksgiving remains and feels more welcome, more necessary, more vital than ever. Thanksgiving Day is a beacon, shining a light on those values for which our country has always stood. A beam, a ray, illuminating our human warmth, a warmth that can yet begin to bring us back together, and of the hopes we bear which might yet be realized. We have started to see the glimpses of this and how a beacon of light can reignite our desire for decency and community, a light that helps us to see the best in others and live the best within ourselves. And we have seen this as Israelis stood for hours in line to give blood to help the victims of the Hamas attack, as both Republican and Democratic leaders have stood with Israel in her time of need, both appearing at the recent March on Washington as well, and clarifying publicly and loudly that the fight against terror is one of good versus evil. As people offered their time and resources to help the now homeless victims and those who have been asked to evacuate. As we know, we have made it past the pandemic, as the threat of a national shutdown has again been averted. And as the American Farm Bureau this week released the figures that the prices of Thanksgiving dinner itself will be lower this year due to the lower costs of turkeys, cranberries, pie crust, and whipped cream. As we have kept our humanity, decency, love, and sense of humor throughout all of this. As. And at the end of the day, it is all these lights and more that we continue to bask in, that we continue to hold up high so that they can continue to guide and shine the way for us and others. So maybe it's not just Thanksgiving that's the beacon of light. Maybe that beacon of light is all who reach out to help those in need, all who try to alleviate human suffering wherever they see it. Maybe that beacon of light is you and me. This Thanksgiving, and then this Hanukkah, and throughout the upcoming new calendar year, let us not wait to shine our light. Keni Ratzon, so may it be.